get rid of nuclear weapons, but the challenge for the SNP is they say on the one hand they want to get rid of nuclear weapons, but they want to join NATO, which has got a nuclear umbrella, and that's the point about NATO. It is governed by a nuclear umbrella, and everyone signs up to that if you join NATO.
Let's be quite clear. Let's be quite clear about this, Jim Gallagher. Am I right in saying that a country cannot necessarily join NATO if there is a dispute over its weaponry? In this case, it would be a dispute over a Trident.
Why? NATO is a membership organisation. It works by unanimity. All the members have to decide whether somebody gets in or not. Nicola's right, of course, there are NATO countries without nuclear weapons. But what there aren't is NATO countries that have thrown out somebody else's nuclear weapons.
What do you think would be the impact of the relationship between Scotland and England if an independent Scotland threw out Trident, there was nowhere else for it to go? Therefore, the people of England who had not voted to get rid of Trident found themselves nuclear-less?
Well, maybe the English people would take the same view as the majority of this audience. Maybe they don't want Trident, but you don't make your decisions about independence or not in order to determine English nuclear policy. That's a decision that has to be made on its own merits and for its own reasons.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think the pragmatics of it would be that if we got rid of Trident, I think the MOD, as we hear, are minded, you know, would just get rid of it entirely. I think it's probably a phallus that can do without it.
Are we talking? How long would it take to get rid of it? Are we talking 10 years?
I think as soon as possible.
But how long is it? Nicola, this is something you clearly know.
CND have produced a report saying it could safely be done in a couple of years. We've said we're responsible. It will have to be the speediest, safe removal of Trident. But, you know, Margaret's position is inconsistent. She says, I want to get rid of all nuclear weapons. How is that consistent with a UK position backed by Labour that wants to replace Trident?
Just in a quick position of fact, Mark, what is the position you have about the idea mooted that actually the whole area around Fastlane where Trident is could somehow be sovereign UK territory?
It's nonsense. And interestingly, the MOD mooted it down the street, distanced itself from that ridiculous idea within about an hour.
Audience, gentleman at the back's got a question.
The argument about Trident is irrelevant to the referendum. Whether you want Trident or you don't want Trident isn't the question that we're going to answer in the referendum. The question we're going to answer in the referendum is, do we make the Trident decision in London or do we make the Trident decision in Scotland? And we're going to make that decision sometime later. And it won't necessarily be in accordance with SNP policy.
Yes, why not? That's about why not, Nicola Sturgeon said, this referendum is about long-term what people think about Scotland. It's not about what the SNP think about Trident. And wouldn't it be better to have a referendum and then say, then there'll be a general election, and if you vote for whatever party comes out of the SNP that doesn't want Trident, then you can get rid of Trident. But why not make it...
Well, there will be a general election. If we become independent in, say, March 2016, which is our target date, there'll be a general election in May 2016. But I'm being honest with you, the SNP wants rid of Trident. I think that's backed by majority opinion in Scotland, and we'll start the process for the removal of Trident from Scotland so that we can invest the money that currently is spent on Trident in the things we were talking about earlier on, things that are far more useful to the people of Scotland.
Well, now let's think about independence and Scottish identity. Now let's think about independence and the Scottish identity. The question of identity is a complex one. Scotland has always been a mongrel nation, and Scots and English have been intertwined for generations, especially here in the border area. Would these relationships change with independence? The nationalists insist that it was questions of democracy, not identity, that were the heart of the referendum debate. But would carrying a Scottish passport, having only the saltire to salute, and singing Flower of Scotland for Olympic gold medals give people a new sense of being Scottish? If Scotland was to take full rights and responsibilities for nationhood, would it actually enhance relations with England without Westminster to blame for any of the nation's ills? Or would Scotland's position as one of the smallest countries in the world, rather than a country in an historic and powerful union, diminish the Scottish nation? Pat, Jack Kane, I understand that the royal families all got together in Balmoral. You know, Alex Salmond has said that, you know, he wants the Queen to be the head of state. How would you feel about you having a King George and an independent Scotland in many years hence? Would you support that?
I'm not hugely excited about it, to be perfectly honest. I think if there's a bicycling monarch, if we head that way, that's fine. Basically a Republican. So I'm not... I mean, I think it's one of the least contentious points in the whole range of things that the variety of people who support independence on the left, like me, would get bothered about. I think ultimately I'd want them to be on their bike rather than bicycling. But, yeah.
OK, well then, let's put another question to you. Do you think it's possible to be a patriotic Scot and vote for the Union?
Of course it is. You know, you can be patriotic to your idea of the country, and that's fine. But I think, I mean, it's interesting, we're just over the tweet here, and I keep thinking, looking at this, how arbitrary it seems. But if you were two Scandinavian countries next to each other, you know, you would say that's also arbitrary, but nevertheless we're going to do things differently across this border. If you were two European countries, France and Germany, you would say there's an arbitrary line, but we're doing things differently here and there. It's really not a difficult concept. The idea that you can have two countries next to each other that have radically or significantly different socio-economic priorities. It's not hard.
The woman in the front row, yes.
The first time I felt engaged with the debate when you're talking about an independence and a different way of doing things. When I hear the politicians arguing about fiscal this and paying for that, I think, well, it's more of the same. My head listens to those arguments and I remain unsure which way to go. My heart says... this is an opportunity to do something so different. And that's what I'm not hearing.
There's an idealism about it.
Margaret Curran, that people actually in Scotland want to do something that is different.
Well, and I think that's the strength of the Scottish Parliament. I've always believed that. I'm very Scottish. You ask me my nationality, I'll always say Scottish first. I also feel partly Irish, but I do feel British as well. I was quite proud that Andy Murray won in Wimbledon too, and that British people cheered him. That made me feel good as a Scot and a British person. But I think the fact is, I don't think it's. I don't think it's Scotland versus England. I think it's Scotland and Britain, and I think that's our strength. And I think I'm very comfortable being Scottish. I don't think that threatens my culture or my different priorities.
You know, you're an author. Your readership is all over the world. How do you think? If Scotland voted for independence, how would it alter the relationship? Here we are actually on the border. How would it alter the relationship? Because surely it would. It would have to.
It would be a great showcase for Scotland. I think becoming independent initially would be a boost culturally for Scotland, a boost for us as an identity, as an awareness internationally. But I think artists, writers, musicians like Pat and I, that's not why we want independence. And another reason I don't think many people want independence, it's interesting, I think Margaret has said several times, I feel very Scottish, I love Scotland. You hardly ever hear people on the yes side say that, and it's not because we don't need to. It's because Scottishness is not the same as caring about Scotland's future. This debate is not about whether you feel Scottish. It's not about what your background is. It's not about a sense of Scottishness. It's about talking about Scotland's future. It's about deciding Scotland's future. And that's got nothing to do with who you feel you are. It's got to do with what we want to do with the future of Scotland and that excitement.
Do you feel, Tessa Hartman, that actually a sovereign Scottish state with rights and responsibilities would, in a sense, not be able to, not that I'm suggesting that people do whinge at Westminster, but wouldn't be able to blame Westminster for any of the nation's ills?
Well, I think what we've got to distinguish between, we talk about ideology and, you know, wouldn't it be great, but that's not reality. There are loads of things that I would love to do that aren't the right thing to do. And what I can tell you, we're talking about my sector. Now, you know, we're struggling in a retail environment with supporting new industry textiles. All the best of British designers right now at the top of their game, trading all the way across the world, are Scottish. How did they get there? They got there from the support and the grants from the British Fashion Council and the British Trade and Industry sector, not Scotland. Now, they have to go on. They are so proud to be Scottish, incredibly proud to be British, but the reality is they wouldn't be there without the support of England.
So, do you feel, Margaret Curran, you know, here we are on the border, Do you think that the border would be open or closed? In the sense, not closed, but that there would be border controls in England and Scotland. Could you see that happening?
Well, that would depend on what arrangements. Perhaps maybe immigration, if you would imply that. But part of
crossing borders.
No, of course you can, and of course, nor you should you. But can I just say, maybe part of the reason why I emphasise my Scottishness is because I have to say, people who are on my side of the argument have been accused of being anti-Scottish. You know, MSPs, genuinely have been accused of being anti-Scottish. I'm sure that Nicola and Pat would disavow that, but that's maybe part of it, because I think it is really important in this debate. It's quite a fevered debate already. I can imagine it's going to get quite fevered as the year goes on. That it is important that those on my side who do see that Scotland gets advantage, not just that it's good to be nice to your neighbours, but we actually get advantage as we do through sporting. I think athletes get trained, fashion designers get advantage through that. I think that would be a loss to Scotland if we became